Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, where we take you behind the curtain of Maryland politics. Today we're joined by Adam Greivell, a Hagerstown area attorney and candidate for state's attorney. We break down the ethics complaint filed by Senator Paul Corderman against Hagerstown City Councilmember Erika Bell, and we examine how it intersects with the Hagerstown Police Department, the police chief himself, and the state's attorney's office. This is law, ethics, and accountability without the spin. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a returning guest, one of our favorite guests, Adam Greivell. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Adam, tonight's topic is very interesting to many people in the Hagerstown region. There's been a whole kerfuffle about a certain council member and their relationship to a gun charge, allegations of malfeasance. Can you give us a breakdown on exactly what's happening, what you know of that happened, and then, you know, where we're going with this?
Sure. So as I have followed the case somewhat closely, I've had a chance to look at the court file and listen to some of the court proceedings myself. Terrence Murphy is the boyfriend of Councilwoman Erika Bell.
Councilwoman of the Hagerstown City Council.
That's right. He refers to her as his common law wife, although Maryland doesn't acknowledge common law marriages. At least they can't arise within the state of Maryland. But that's what he called her at the bond hearing. Anyhow, he was charged in August for an incident that happened in July. And he was charged with 2 felony counts of being a felon in possession of a handgun, a regulated firearm, and a misdemeanor firearm offense. And evidently, someone told the police, and the police checked the video surveillance around the city. It, clearly looked like he had a handgun on him. It was being sort of brandished on his hip as an open carry, which you're not allowed to open carry in Maryland. Upon an investigation, the Hagerstown Police Department, in consultation with the state's attorney's office, had decided to indict him. As it turns out, the same day, July 27th, in a completely coincidental event, Terrence Murphy was pulled over that evening leaving the park. And the police, during that encounter, had no idea that there was any incident with the gun. And that body camera is also available online, I think on Radio Free Hub City, you can see it. And he's going through this refusal to provide evidence of his driver's license. And the police are preparing to tow his vehicle because they can't allow him to drive if they can't validate that he's authorized to drive. So they start this, inventory search, and then one way or another, he produces evidence of his valid West Virginia driver's license, I believe. And so they don't tow him that evening, and they don't charge him with anything. During that encounter, Councilwoman Bell shows up and interfaces with the police, sort of snatches a sack out of the vehicle, which he's allowed to do. He wasn't under any suspicion of any other unlawful activity other than perhaps speeding.
Most police officers will allow somebody whose vehicle is being towed to secure personal items that they want to keep with them. Again, right. It's not a criminal activity. It's an inventory. If he wants to take his property, he has every right to do so.
A week or so later, that the police become aware of a complaint that this person at the park had a handgun on him. And again, you've probably seen the video. I think it's still up on Radio Free Hub City, where you can see, he's got a handgun. He's walking through the park. There's lots of kids around. They're having a basketball tournament there. The police have a meeting with state's attorney's office, and obviously they know who he is. In particular, they know who he is because he was arrested for something that happened in 2023. Ultimately pled guilty to that in October 2024, and was actually still on probation for that when this incident occurred. But they knew who he was. They knew who his relationship with Councilwoman Bell. During the park incident, and what was reviewed on the camera was Councilwoman Bell had the gun in her possession at some point and actually took the gun into his car with her. The police during the pullover incident didn't know anything about a gun, but they pieced it together after the fact, and there was a question as to whether Councilwoman Bell had engaged in any criminal conduct by picking up a regulated firearm and transporting or helping to conceal it or whatever in a park in the city of Hagerstown.
And I guess a question here as well is that when she was interacting with the police, we said when he was pulled over, so at some point, Terrence, he reached out to her apparently and let her know, and she came to participate in the interaction. So one, I guess, is there also a suspicion, an accusation that she was trying essentially to distract the police officer so that Terrence would have the opportunity to potentially take the gun out of the car without the police officer noticing?
I'm sure some people believe that. I think that's a matter of interpretation, and I'm not entirely certain there's anything unlawful about that conduct. You might not want to see that kind of conduct out of your elected officials.
Here's my concern. When she showed up on scene to intercede for her common law husband or whatever relationship they have, did she identify herself as a council member, and did she try to use that influence to influence the investigation?
Right. I'm not aware. I don't recall seeing that occur on the video, but I didn't watch every second of the video, and it may have happened, it may not. I believe that was the impetus for Senator Corderman's ethics complaint, was that this pattern had occurred more than once where Mr. Murphy was involved in a interaction with the police, and she appears on the scene, and everyone knows who she is. She doesn't really even have to announce herself. I think all the police members know who she is.
That is something that this particular member seems to have been accused of previously. I know there's another video, completely unrelated situation, where this council member inserts themselves into a police officer dealing with a child who I guess had vandalized a park to some extent, and she also inserted herself into that to, I think it's pretty clear, to somehow influence the outcome. So this is a pattern of events,
and I think it bears noting that I think you said he violated probation, which he may have, the conduct we observed might violate the terms of his probation, but he was never charged with violating his probation.
The fact that he's on probation actually lowers his expectation for searching. Okay. So if a police officer knows somebody is on parole or probation, they have every right to search the car. And the fact that there was allegations that he had a weapon in the public, in the open, and he's on probation, that is an accelerator. That is a force multiplier for a police officer to be able to exercise his authority. The fact is that these Hagerstown police officers did not exercise that authority. And I want to know, my question as a citizen is why? What inhibited them from doing their job?
They saw something suspicious and they pulled him over. But your point is well taken. But they didn't know about a gun until much later. The issue that I can't seem to make a lot of sense of is that when you look at the state's attorney's office statement that they put out following the dismissal of these charges.
By the way, we'll post that in our comment section, that state's attorney statement. It is very troubling to me, that statement.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe what the current state's attorney said was that there was some evidence that was reviewed following the indictment And that the fact, coupled with the fact that when they conducted a preliminary inventory search of the vehicle, they didn't discover or they didn't find any gun. And so they've never obtained possession of a regulated firearm, which he was accused of having. What was troubling to me out of that statement, which goes to the heart of my why I'm running, period, is that it hides the ball. She never says, well, we didn't find a gun when we searched the vehicle, but we didn't know there was a gun and we weren't searching for a gun when we searched the vehicle. We were doing an inventory search, based on, potential impoundment of the vehicle or towing of the vehicle. So they never searched for a gun. They never obtained a warrant at any point in time after they arrested this man. They indicted him. They ultimately held him in jail without bond for 97 days. They asked the circuit court judge to hold him without bond. Assistant State's Attorney Brock Shriver gave a very forceful, powerful statement at the bond hearing on September 5, arguing to Judge Wilson how confident they were that this was a gun based on all the video evidence they saw, based on Councilwoman Bell's statements in a official police interview where she said something along the lines of, well, I'm not going to say it was or wasn't a gun, or I'm not going to admit it was a gun, but even if it was, I have an HQL. So if I touched it, it wasn't a problem. And, of course, the police set her straight on that having an HQL doesn't authorize you to open carry a gun or anything of that nature. You can buy and sell more or less. The state's attorney, Brock Shriver, was assistant state's attorney, was very confident and very forceful and persuaded Judge Wilson to hold him without bond.
He was vigorous.
Okay.
He was vigorous in his prosecution.
Very much so.
And 90 days
fast
later,
forward,
he was sending some kind of letter out, making an excuse of why he's not going to null pros the case.
The statement, the official statement put out by the state's attorney's office made it look like, I think the wording was something like Assistant State's Attorney Shriver decided to dismiss the case and that Gina Cerencione supported his decision. I don't think that's how it went down. I could be wrong. But if that's the same man who argued on September 5 how forcefully they knew this was a gun, and they knew going into this that he was going to claim it wasn't a real gun, and he, in fact, Terrence Murphy said in that hearing on the record something like, I did not have a lethal weapon. It was a non-lethal weapon that I had. Okay, so he was claiming then it wasn't a real gun. Reference has been made to recorded calls from the jail where Terrence Murphy said that he was, going to say it wasn't a lethal weapon, or that he said it wasn't a lethal weapon, and that based on that, they were going to not prosecute the case, which is not new evidence.
And by this point, if I'm following correctly, it had already gone before a grand jury. Evidence from the prosecution had already been presented. The grand jury agreed with the prosecution that there seems to be something here. And then it went to a bond hearing where it was further discussed. And then a judge agreed that there is some serious issues going on here. And then 90 days later is when it was null processed by the same prosecuting team that had done all of this work beforehand.
Correct. And to my understanding, there was no real new evidence, although it was stated as such in the state's attorney's office statement.
Yeah, I think let's go back to that, Adam, for just a second. The state's attorney used as new evidence a statement made by the suspect in prison to a cohort on a recorded line saying that it wasn't a real weapon. They knew that from the very beginning. They vigorously prosecuted it with that knowledge already. That's not new evidence. So what changed? In 97 days, what changed from a vigorous prosecution of a case they thought they could win and got an indictment from a grand jury till the point where they null prossed it, basically saying, we don't know whether we can prove this or not.
Right. So you can imagine a situation where you get the indictment, you don't have a perfect case yet, but you got enough. An indictment, really, you're just asking the grand jury, do you think there's probable cause? That's a low bar, effectively the same bar to get a search warrant. And so they indicted him. So you imagine you might have a case where you don't have much more than that, but now you get the indictment and you're going to continue to investigate. You're going to execute search warrants on this or that. You're going to interview more people. Based on all the records I've seen, Councilwoman Bell has not affirmatively stated anywhere this was not a regulated firearm. She has not affirmatively stated this is a pepper ball gun or some other type of thing that looks like a gun. I haven't seen that. She had plenty of opportunity to deny that. And as far as I know, other than maybe on the recorded line and in the bail hearing, I don't know that Terrence Murphy has affirmatively tried to prove that it was this or that. And that's fine. It's not the defendant's job to prove he's not guilty. But you would think if as a prosecutor, that was your chief concern, I can't win this case if he, says it's not a real gun, don't bring the case. What a terrible miscarriage of justice that was foisted upon him. If they knew from the beginning, they would never, ever take this case to trial and they would never be able to convict him based solely on the evidence they had. And then they never tried to get more evidence. They let him rot in jail for 97 days and then say, we don't have the goods. We're going to let you go. What a horrible, horrible way to treat a citizen.
And the implication then is that they genuinely, truly did believe it. And then something happened separate from the facts of the case that caused them to change their mind.
As the state's attorney, and I've had this conversation with Gina, I told her in a lengthy conversation back in April we had about me running. I said, look, you might be doing factually the best job that can be done in every single case. You might be. But part of your job is to make sure that we all know it, that we all know you're doing a great job. And I don't think that message is getting out here. And in this case, when you allow the public perception of how this case is played out to play out this way, all you see is question marks. All you see as a citizen is why would they do that? If her story is correct, that new evidence came out that made it impossible or impractical for them to actually secure a conviction, show it to us. Where is it? Do you have a receipt? Did you do a search warrant? Did you look at their phones and see the messages? Does he have a receipt for a non-lethal weapon? Even if he did, why wasn't there a charge for violating the city-specific provisions that prohibit even that type of device in the city or in the park? And why wasn't he charged with violating his probation? Okay, give it to us. Tell us. Don't just tell us nothing changed except for we didn't find the gun and now we decided not to prosecute after letting him sit in jail for 97 days. That leads to two conclusions. You committed a horrible injustice against this man when you never intended to take it to trial, and you deprived his freedom for 97 days, or you're lying. You're lying about what happened. Something changed that you don't want to tell us. And transparency and accountability are absolutely key to us public citizens having some faith that our trusted servants are doing justice.
And further muddying the water is the allegations of inappropriate behaviors by the Hagerstown Police Department. For instance, the interactions with Councilmember Bell and Police Chief Kiefer, specifically when they happened, how they happened, what was their relationship to the investigation as a whole. People are asking questions. They want to know, and they have a right to know what is going on here. There was reports of secret meetings between Councilmember Bell and Chief Kiefer at City Hall. We want to know, what was the outcome of that? Why did that happen? Who called that meeting? And what was the outcome of it? And why were the two officers involved with Murphy originally in the park both suspended subsequently to this incident? Did it have any relationship to the incident? Why was they suspended? These questions, people have a legitimate concern and a legitimate right to ask. And the appearance is of impropriety.
Mayor McIntyre gave an interview on News Talk, Tri-State, I guess. He voiced the concern that I've heard repeatedly that the police are actually quite frustrated with the way things go down. This being a prime example of that, where they do the hard work, they do the hard investigation, they go secure charges, and then someone goes boo to the state's attorney's office and they go away. The charges go away. They get pled down to nothing or they get outright dismissed. And I know the police are frustrated because they would like to see cases taken to trial. I personally would like to see cases taken to trial and let the judge be the judge. I don't have to go easy on people if I think they don't deserve a harsh penalty, but they still committed a bad crime. That's the judge's job. Let the judge make those decisions, and he can bear the weight of the consequences that he or she doles out.
The Hagerstown City police officers are good cops. They have a tough job and a tough beat and a tough area. And for them to develop a case, go to indictment, and then it be dismissed 90 days later, null pros, is so disrespectful to the work that they put in.
Yeah, I agree. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and transparency goes an awful long way. I don't know whether anything wrongful happened or not, but the perception that has been created is one that is full of suspicion and wonder. It's an environment that causes people to think, well, something very unusual happened. It just happened to be very unusually good or positive for someone that was very connected to a city council member. And the relationship here is the chief of police serves at the pleasure of the city council, not of the mayor, not really of the city administrator, but of the city council can pull his chain whenever they want, meaning they can terminate his contract or not renew, or only renew on less than favorable terms. And so he has to keep 3 of them happy with him if he wants to keep his job. And so that dynamic makes it would make an ordinary person of ordinary sensibilities suspect if the chief of police meets individually with the boyfriend or common law, or with the girlfriend or common law wife of a person who's been charged with a felony, or who's going to be charged with a felony. And she happens to be, if her and 2 other council people get together, she's his boss. And then the charges go away, and he didn't ruffle any feathers. That's a perception. And here's the thing. I'm not accusing him of anything. I have no reason to believe he would ever do anything unethical of that nature. But he has to deal with the fact that that's a perception. The chief needs to be aware of the fact that people are watching, and that if people observe that he's in the meeting with the state's attorney, he's in a meeting with the councilwoman whose boyfriend is being charged with a felony, where it's actively being discussed whether or not to charge her with anything, even if there's absolutely nothing unethical being said or discussed, or nothing corrupt in any way, shape, or form, people are going to wonder about that because of the nature of the situation and the dynamics of the relationship. So as a public servant, you have to be aware of that. People are watching.
The appearance of impropriety is something they must avoid at all costs. That you have to be above board. There may not be any corruption. You're right. And we have no idea what's going on with Chief Kiefer right now, but we do know this. There are people asking questions, and they have a legitimate concern when he's meeting privately with a sitting city councilwoman about charges that are related to her common law husband or wherever he is. That's an appearance of impropriety that that needs to be discussed and explained.
And the ethics violations. And so this is a situation that truly seems to have gotten out of control, and potentially for all of the right reasons. I mean, Senator Corderman putting a ethics complaint against her, the city councilwoman, against Chief Kiefer. I believe he also mentions whether there's an ethics complaint or not against the state's attorney, because the amount of impropriety is tremendous, to the point that even the mayor, who is generally, I would say, one of the most level-headed individuals, in Hagerstown, was on the radio. And I'm paraphrasing, but I believe what he said was, look, I saw the same videos and pictures as everyone else, and I don't understand why more isn't being done. I mean, when it gets to the point when Mayor McIntyre is having to make comments like that are so out of character for him, it really is an indicator of how dramatic it really is. And then you have what seems to potentially be some degree, seeing the system truly let crime go, so to speak.
There's a concern that everybody has, I think, in their soul as an American, that justice is meted out fairly. Having spent 20 some years in the criminal justice system as a participant, you get to see how things play out, and you get to see that this is an unusual case, okay? And they're trying to make it seem usual, and it's just not. But it looks like this was special treatment. And to try to pass it off as business as usual, we don't engage in political prosecutions. Well, it's hard to sell that story when you don't play it the same way in all cases. It's clear from the record, the public record, that the state's attorney's office and the Hagerstown City Police were prepared to prosecute this case to trial based on what they had at the time they went to the grand jury for the indictment. If they never got another piece of evidence, they were ready to go. The state has no business depriving anyone of their freedom unless they can prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. If the person is guilty, but the state doesn't have the goods and they can't get the goods through a lawful way that respects your rights, the state has no business putting you away, even if you are guilty.
Agreed. And they did in this case, and then changed their mind about 90 something days later, which is absolutely ridiculous. There's a lot of issues going on with this particular subject. We could talk about it probably all night long, but hopefully we've covered a little bit and asked some interesting questions. Although we make no allegations of corruption or any kind of malfeasance or collusion by the people who are there, there is an appearance of impropriety that needs to be dealt with by public officials, both in the police department and the state's attorney's office. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being with us tonight, man. You're always a great guest with a great insight on what's going on. We appreciate you being here with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me. 2 for 2.
As this case updates, and there is a huge backlash happening right now in the Hagerstown community. As things develop, I'd love to bring you back on to get your take. Wonderful.
Sure thing. Yep.
Hey, this has been Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me,
Ethan Lowen,
my co-host, and we've got our very interesting guest, Adam Greivell. Please, if you liked what you saw today, share it with your friends. If you didn't like it, share it with your enemies. We're equal opportunity entertainment. Thank you very much. Have a great night. Thank you to Adam Greivell, attorney and candidate for state's attorney, for breaking down the ethics complaints involving Hagerstown City Councilmember Erika Bell. The charging decisions in this case have raised serious questions, especially given Bell's role as a sitting council member and at a minimum create the appearances of impropriety. The public deserves transparency from its officials, and this matter is far from over. Like, follow, and share for more content like this on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.